Hey everyone, Brendan Snyder here. It's with a very sad and heavy heart to announce the shocking news that Ozzy Osbourne has passed away at 76. We all just saw the Prince of Darkness taking part in a final Black Sabbath performance that he did at the most recent Back to the Beginning show that took place on July 5th. So for it to only be 17 days later and he has since passed away on July 22nd of 2025, I have to say that I am utterly shocked at this news that has just come out. We know that Ozzy suffered from a number of ailments and issues over the last 5 years, especially since ending his farewell tour that he was doing in 2020, never being able to fully complete that solo final farewell tour that he was doing. And those health issues just kept mounting, and he was never quite able to get back up to 100% to be able to go out on the road, which is what ultimately led to the Back to the Beginning farewell show that just took place. Now, that was all about, really all about Black Sabbath in the end of the day, although there was a lot of great stuff focusing on Ozzy's solo work as well. And luckily, he was able to perform a solo set from that. But Ozzy Osbourne and Black Sabbath, arguably the archetypes of heavy metal, inventing what we know today as heavy metal. The band itself formed in '68, even though they didn't release their debut album, the self-titled, until 1970. The band was kicking around under the name Earth in '68, but changing up what they would do with Iommi downtuning and forming what would become, the heavy metal guitar riff and style, and releasing, 8 albums with Ozzy Osbourne during their original run from 1970 up to 1978 with Never Say Die. And then a 35-year gap would take place before we would get the album 13, really kind of putting a nice cap on everything at that point. But in between all of that, what's interesting is that they reformed in 1997, playing out in the Ozfest and basically touring on and off again for 20 years before finally doing a farewell ending tour in 2017. Now, I had just mentioned and talked about their Back to the Beginning performance they did on July 5th, only 17 days earlier. And here we are now talking about Ozzy having passed. And say what you will about that final performance that he did. He was seated. We knew that he had been dealing with a lot of ailments and things to get to the point to be able to go out to do that show. And we know that some of that, whether it was to cash in or for him to really be able to say goodbye, I think the performance, and you could see the look on his face that if nothing else for Ozzy, he really wanted to be there for it. Whether or not everyone else involved wanted it for something else is another story. But that show got to take place. Ozzy got to do his final saying goodbye, both with Black Sabbath and with his solo band as well. And when he was booted out of Black Sabbath in '79 and began his solo career, it would ultimately triumph over Black Sabbath in the end of the day, releasing 13 solo albums between 1980 and 2022, a 42-year span of recording. I mean, if we talk about the 2 albums that were essentially recorded together, Blizzard of Oz and Diary of a Madman, all the way up until Patient Number 9 from 2022. I mean, the fact that we've got 42 years of Ozzy between this, and this stuff is classic, yes, but this was a great album, and he really never changed who he was in the entire time of doing his solo thing, and really not in the entire time since 1970 with the debut Black Sabbath album. So in all the time that we knew or got to experience Ozzy, whether with Black Sabbath in the original run or the various reunions and things like this, where we got the reunion live album that even featured 2 new songs on it, before we finally got 13 in 2013 and becoming the final Black Sabbath album to cap everything off for the band. Ozzy Osbourne was always Ozzy Osbourne. And in between all of that stuff that he was doing, he was a reality TV star, one of the very first out there. Before we had the Kardashians and all these other ones that are out there that really make a living off of just being famous from being a reality TV star, Ozzy did it really to open up and show what it was like behind the scenes. And whereas we really only knew Ozzy from the music videos and MTV and seeing him live and all of that, I have to say it was an utter shock to me when I saw Ozzy just being an average, ordinary guy, a dad, a husband, and wasn't this Prince of Darkness that I had grown up with in the persona that he was as far as the music industry was concerned. And so that whole idea of Ozzy and ultimately his family and everyone who was along with him for that ride, but seeing the Osbournes and Ozzy in their day-to-day life was a really crazy thing to experience, especially with someone so tied in with the whole metal movement and all. And aside from that, Ozzy has played with some of the most amazing guitar players and musicians out there. In particular, as I talked about on these 2 albums at the very beginning, his debut and second album, Randy Rhoads from Quiet Riot, who joined his band and showed exactly what he was made of and what he was capable of, and who knows where he would have gone on to had there not been the unfortunate plane crash that took his life. Thank goodness Ozzy was not part of that, though, and would continue on. And then Ozzy brings in Brad Gillis, who would go on to take on the mantle of Night Ranger, but he plays live with Ozzy. And when that doesn't transpire, that Brad Gillis stays on, he brings in Jake Ely, who records not only this fantastic album, but this one here. And then when that doesn't work out, he brings in Zakk Wylde, who gives us a number of amazing albums, including No More Tears. And on this one here, at this point, Ozzy is basically saying, I'm done with touring, I'm hanging it up. And in 1992, heads out on the No More Tours tour. Thank goodness that didn't hold, and he returns in 95 and he continues on. And he has Zakk Wylde play with him here and there. But in I don't know what year it was, but for this album, Scream, he has Gus G from Firewind come in and play. And it's just like Ozzy has some of the most amazing guitar players. And on the final 2 albums that Ozzy would record, while there's guest artists and Zakk Wylde and people like that, the guitar player and person behind these was Andrew Watt, who comes from the band California Breed that was with Glenn Hughes and Jason Bonham. So just amazing musicians that came in to play and be in the presence of Ozzy Osbourne and all the amazing things that he was part of. So, Ozzy returns from the No More Tours tour that ended in 1992, which had a Black Sabbath performance at the end of it where he was saying goodbye at that time. So it was almost sort of bittersweet that we have the Back to the Beginning where Ozzy's doing the solo set, but again, having a final Black Sabbath performance and everything from. And with the final tour, solo tour that Ozzy would do, the No More Tours 2, that unfortunately didn't get to finish out. Again, it all leads to the July 5th, 2025 performance of Back to the Beginning. And it was a triumphant performance from all who was involved, all the different bands that came out to pay tribute, to play Black Sabbath songs, solo Ozzy songs, and for both the band and Ozzy to be present to take all of that in and feel all of that love that is being shown to them, but also to finally have that way to say goodbye. And Ozzy had long said that he wanted to play a final show with Black Sabbath that featured Bill Ward returning to the drums, because on their original 2017 final tour that they did, The End, Bill Ward was not part of. So it was really great that that all was able to take place. And so, Ozzy was someone who was always able to give it his all. He never did anything half-assed, all the way until the very end, his final performance. Whether seated or not, the energy from Ozzy Osbourne was palpable. It was something that you could see that he was really into and enjoying, and so grateful and glad that he had the opportunity to do. And no one knew that his passing would be so quick, so soon after that performance, that it would take on such a monumentous thing that we just saw him do one last live performance. Luckily he was able to be there to say his goodbyes, to be with Black Sabbath, and for all the fans that were able to take that in person, and those that streamed it, and everyone else that watched it on YouTube could tune in, saying their goodbyes, at least in live terminology of the bands being out on the road and playing live. But we all knew that this day would come sooner rather than later. Rest in peace, Ozzy Osbourne. You will be missed, but not forgotten. And I do not believe there will ever be another person like Ozzy Osbourne, someone who enveloped the metal personality so well, so much. He lived it, he breathed it, he was it, and he shared it too with everyone who came in contact with him. It will be certainly a tragic loss here, but also a very missed person in general, I think, through so many things because of all the lives that he touched, whether it be through the music or his persona that has come up and been part of pop culture and everything else that he has been in. Again, rest in peace, Ozzy. You will be missed, but not forgotten. And now I certainly recommend to everyone who's tuned into this, that's feeling this loss, the great loss that it is, to break out your Ozzy Osbourne solo albums, to break out your Black Sabbath albums, and remember all the great music that he gave us, that he performed over the last 55 plus years that he was a musical performer. And enjoy that stuff and say your goodbyes, but remember the good times that Ozzy and Black Sabbath gave us.